Hello everyone and welcome to our online session today with Juniper Education. It's about a joined up approach to homeschool partnership. It's going to be a fascinating conversation today because actually in the background I know that Juniper has done a lot of work in how to develop their system to actually improve this for schools, and they've been listening to schools and actually how to develop the joined up approach to homeschool partnership. And actually with the new white paper that came out in February, there's a lot of information in that. And actually, during all our conversations in our community, there's a lot of conversations about parents and how to engage parents. And the rise of the complaints as well is actually to nip it in the bud early with the homeschool communication is a good way to go and do it. So this is why we invited Juniper to come and do this webinar today, this online session, to really explain how it could work and how their development has really improved in sort of like how schools can do homeschool partnership. And so I'm delighted to have Helen and Anna here today. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
And we've got a conversational session today about this and about the white paper and all the latest in homeschool partnerships and how we can help with that. So if you do have any questions, do put it into the chat and ask away. I'll be in the background sort of like answering some of the questions and posing some of the questions. And also just to start off, say where you are, what job role you are, and how we can help you with your homeschool partnership. So on that note, I'm just going to hand over to Anna and Helen, and they're going to introduce themselves and tell us a bit more about what the joined up education approach to education is.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And it's great to be part of this. And thank you very much for taking time out of your days to listen to this webinar. So we really want to be able to discuss with you how Juniper have approached this and how we really believe in that collaborative partnership that we want to build with schools. So, so I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Anna Rushby. I'm Chief Product Officer at Juniper Education. But actually, my background and my heart very definitely lies in schools. I've worked in education for 15 years. I was a primary school teacher, and at the point at which I left, I was a Senko. And so for me, really making sure that we are listening and we understand the space in which our schools live and work is really, really important to us. And I'm joined here today with Helen Flischer.
Hello, yes. So I'm the product manager team lead at Juniper. So I've been in the role for about 4 years, but my EdTech experience is actually getting on for about 9 years. So before that, I was supporting schools and multi-academy trusts with websites and parental engagement tools as well. So with what I've been doing over the last few years in the product role is really taking that experience and seeing how we can produce something that is better than what we've done before. So it's been a really exciting few years, and what we've got today to show you is kind of how we've built to that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so as Jonathan said, this session is probably going to seem quite conversational. We're not the sort of people that are going to be reading from a script. That's not how we approach things. But what we really wanted to showcase during this session is really the steps that we've taken to get to the point where we're at now with the homeschool partnerships that we're trying to promote and encourage and support. So we're going to walk very informally, I would say, through these areas, these points. But what's really important for us as you're listening is think how what we're saying feels for you, your setting, your school, and your role, because there will be hopefully a lot of things that resonate with you, that you can see how our journey has progressed, but also if there's things that don't quite resonate with you, if they don't feel like, that's not representative of how we feel about homeschool partnerships, what we'd love, and we'll talk about this at the end, is about how you can get involved. So we're going to start with, where we understand homeschool partnerships work and the aim that we're trying to get to, why sometimes that feels hard, why that communication is a challenge, as Jonathan said, a rise in complaints, but also, a real understanding that there is, a vast difference with the families that attend school, from your very, very engaged parents to your very, very disengaged parents, and how we've used that through our thought process and our development processes. And then through the launch of our Juniper Education App and Join Up, where we believe and where we've had feedback that this is now improving in schools. And then at the end, if you're keen to participate, we'd love to know where this could make a difference in your school. So that's how we're going to talk through this. Any questions, please pop them in the chat. It's lovely to know who you are and where you're from. But yes, let's move on. So where we wanted to start was, those homeschool partnerships, when they are working well, what does that look like? So kind of starting at the end, I guess, what does success look like? And there's a multitude of things, but there are these 3 key points that really, we believe if these are true, that your homeschool partnership and your relationship with those families is a positive. And obviously, you need strong relationships, you need trust, you need confidence, and that ability to be able to, share information in a consistent way, in a positive way, so that when there are times when that information sharing, might need something a harder conversation, that trust is already built. We need consistency, and we want to be able to prove or to be able to show that the engagement that you've got is high, and we're going to talk later on about the active and the passive nature of communication. But really, what I wanted to say here was, this isn't Juniper Education deciding that this is what good looks like in reality. This has come about from hundreds of conversations with schools, and the way in which we have engaged with our current customers to make sure that what we're building and what we're developing is the right thing. But also, I think for me, having worked in education and then moved into a product role, one of the things I love most about working with Juniper Education is that the expertise that we have in Juniper Education in terms of education, whether that's people in our team, in the product team, or more widely, in most cases, there's either education background like myself who've worked in schools, or it's that people like Helen who've been working in ed tech for 8-9 years and really have been customer facing, have been through like those conversations. This isn't something that we're approaching in isolation. And so what I wanted to say here was that what we wanted to do was really make sure that we understood that lived reality, not my perception of it, just because I happen to be leading this team, but this is a whole kind of UK wide understanding. So it's your lived experience and it's your pedagogy that we have developed alongside. And I think one of the things that I wanted to be able to share was this isn't Juniper Education telling you this is what it looks like in reality. This is what we've understood for those conversations. So like I said at the beginning, if there's something we've missed here or something that we haven't got right, we want to make sure that we open those conversations with you and with schools, to make sure that, what we are delivering against is right. So relationships, communication, and engagement, and when it works, we believe that those homeschool partnerships will be stronger and more positive for you. So we've put this slide in really just before we get into the conversation around this, was the ed tech landscape, I guess, and I probably should say that until I left teaching, I wasn't even really aware of that word, that ed tech landscape. But, you know, it's been really, really clear that having stepped outside of school, there's a whole world of technology that is developing at very different paces. And, you know, really, I remember we went back into one school and spoke to a teacher, and I said, you know, oh, tell me about the ed tech that you use, having been out of school and used to using this language. And I remember he said to me, I don't think we have any ed tech. I think we might have some bebops in the classroom somewhere. So it is one of those things where, you know, you talk about it and you might feel that it's something you know, that doesn't touch you or that it isn't part of your daily life. But, you know, I think we all realize now how much of a influence that it has. So in terms of parent engagement, though, you know, you've got all of these different touch points that are supported by technology. You've got, you know, the way in which, you know, you can perhaps update your pupil records through sending out forms and, you know, consents to parents. You've got app messaging, you've got SMS alerts for when, you know, you need to get some urgent information across to a school. You've got your letters and your news and your policy documents from your website. You've got your school reports and how you might send those home. Then you've got, you know, trips and payments. It's so vast, and all of these are touch points for your school. And when we were looking across this, because, you know, obviously, you know, we're not just looking at, you know, what schools need, we need to look at what's out there at the moment. And, you know, those items, that those bits of software that are working well, it really does feel like you've got two choices out there. One of them is, you know, you try and stick with one system that does it all, but perhaps doesn't give you very much depth in terms of the information that you can share. Or you pick a specialist product, and that's great, but you can end up with 3 or 4 specialist products, and that means, you know, your parents have got, you know, 3, 4, 5 different apps on their phone. And the flip side of that is how do you triangulate all that information? How do you make sure that, you know, all of these great touch points that you've got with schools come back to help inform your improvement plans or the way in which you want to improve engagement? So this was just really to show, you know, we've looked out there, and, you know, we can see all of these different elements that you've got, and we just want to be able to kind of, over time, pull these into one place so that you not only get the breadth that you need, but also that depth and that the ability to put it across in a strategic way. So hopefully now we can spend a bit of time between Helen and I talking about this process then from Juniper Education's point of view. And so where did we start? So Helen, I'd love you to talk to us a little bit about how you approached this problem, because I know that it isn't something that we just thought of 6 months ago and thought, I know, we'll build an app. So yeah, tell us where you started.
So in terms of time frame, it started about 4 years ago when I first came into the product role. And one of the things that we had to get right was really understanding those problems. And like we've said already, we don't just want to take our opinion on what we thought the problems were. It was really important that we spoke to schools about what those issues were and that those challenges and how they're currently overcoming them. But then in the ideal world, how they could overcome them if maybe the technology and solutions looked a little bit different. We actually then took it a little bit of a step further. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was think about that school's end user. That's what the term that we would use in development. So we actually got in front of parents, and the differences of what each sort of persona wanted was night and day, really. And they're for different reasons. So schools were telling us that, you know, they were sending out communications, they were doing their newsletters, and, you know, sending messages, sending updates about what children have been doing in class.
And that can be really time consuming, right? That,
Yeah.
you know, that isn't, you know, that isn't something that's just part of your, you know, as a, you know, as a teacher, you don't necessarily go into it thinking about all of these different touch points, you know, and, you know, for school office staff, you know, coordinating that must be, you know, huge.
Yeah, really hard. And then if you know, thinking about that previous slide, those different mechanisms in which you would use to do all of those different types of updates is quite a lot to think about. What parents then actually told us was that they get information from schools, but it's quite generic. Or it's not tailored to their child or the class that they're in, or sometimes even the year group that they're in. So they really wanted to drill down into that sort of tailored content. But then there is that balance. How do you get the balance of tailored content whilst making sure that it's efficient for schools? It's a really hard thing for us to overcome, and we've got further to go with that. You know, we don't have all the perfect answers, which is why sessions like this and the product discovery that we'll continue to do are really important. But what we've created so far really starts to move in that direction, and that direction for us is communication is very passive. So that's about sending information to parents. Engagement is totally different. Engagement is more strategic. In order to get engagement, the parent really needs to resonate with that content. They need to hold it, they need to think about it, and they need to do something with it. They need to feel something from it. And that's where we've really taken our approach forward. So yeah, that's kind of where we've come to. That's where we started and where we're starting to head over the next sort of year or so.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time, and I think, you know, certainly I can see, you know, I'm in a position where I've not only been a teacher, but I'm also a parent, so I can totally see both sides of things. And I think as a parent, so now I don't teach, as a parent, I always second guess my communications with schools, because I don't want to add to that burden, but also, you know, sometimes things just don't feel quite right. So it is really interesting. And I remember, must have been 2-3 years ago, you went out to a school, didn't you? And you actually interviewed a school and a parent side by side, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. And it was, again, just really interesting because, and both of those individuals were, that the goal was the same. What they wanted was an engaged parent that knew what their child was doing in school, that knew what the school was doing within the community. The goals were the same. Actually, it's probably best for the next slide. So the goals were the same, but how they wanted that information, how they thought each person needed that sort of information to achieve it was just very different. And like we said, you know, it is that balance between the how do we give the parents that information without burdening teachers and the administrators in school. It's a real fine line, but they all want the same goal, and I think that's what's really important. But the interviews were really interesting, and it actually started a conversation between those individuals as well together. So it wasn't just me interviewing; it made a conversation between those people as well, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, I actually get your point, actually, but I still want this." You know, that sort of thing was really nice, and it really gave us an opportunity to find, you know, what are those challenges and frustrations that school leaders may face with that, but then how do then parents then receive that and make sure that they have the right information about their child.
I mean, that's a really good point, isn't it? And it is about turning it from being, you know, I'm a school and I want to be able to share information with my parents, and I'm sending information, and a parent who's receiving information, you know, might need to respond, you know, to whatever's being asked, or signing up for something, or, you know, remembering to send their child in fancy dress for World Book Day or whatever it is. But it's turning it into a conversation where you really have value. And I bet that was really interesting to see that play out, because that's where, you know, trust gets built, isn't it? We did that webinar, was it back in January, February, with Tooled Up, and we talked about the power of positive parental engagement. And Tooled Up are incredible, because, you know, the information that they share to support schools with building better relationships. You know, it's entirely backed by, you know, academic research. It's evidence led. It's not just, you know, we think this works, so have a go at it. It's, you know, so that was another element of, you know, ensuring that we really understood the power behind getting this right and the difference that it then makes, because it's not just a tick box exercise that says we've communicated with parents. When it's right, it can completely alter the child's kind of the way they approach school life, right? And you know, we've put here, you know, parents want, and that's and teachers want, and yes, we've generalized, you know, parents are on an engagement scale themselves, you know, from, you know, you're really engaged parents, that, you know, the ones that, you know, they fill in every form, they read every newsletter, you know, they're probably the ones that, you know, email the most, or perhaps, you know, want to know more and more about their child, to the real kind of polar opposite, where you've got, you know, you've got no idea whether, you know, through whether it's the way that you're delivering the message, whether it's, you know, the way in which, you know, you're tailoring that content. But, you know, I worked in you know, an inner city school where, you know, reaching parents, you know, was really, really challenging, but for so many different reasons. Language literacy level, the fact that, you know, the parents had a negative experience themselves of school. So, you know, as soon as their children, you know, it was like, well, we have to do this, we have to send our children to school, otherwise, you know, we get fined. You know, they're just, you know, so much harder to reach. But when you can, you know, turn that around, and when you can build on that relationship, and you know, they can see that school experience is positive for their child, you know, it can start to make that difference for outcomes and progress for those pupils. So yeah, it's, you know, all of those different elements, and, you know, really keen, you know, whether now as part of this webinar, or afterwards, if you want to get in touch with Helen or I, you know, your experience of, you know, when it goes right, you know, what that does to the child is just, you know, it's really important for us to kind of understand that. You know, obviously, you know, it's important for us to understand when it doesn't go right, but, you know, that really allows us to make sure that, you know, we build the right tools into the system. And hopefully, you know, in a few slides time, you'll be able to see we'll get into the way that it was actually built to support you on that side of things. So yeah.
Cool.
So when we look here, I think this one's probably leads us actually into that part that surprised me when I left education. I guess I didn't really, you know, you consume technology all the time, and, you know, it isn't, you don't get to phone Microsoft and say, I don't like the way Excel worked, because it, you know, it kept changing my number into a date. You know, you don't realize that actually, you know, for maybe Microsoft isn't, I'm not saying we're comparable to Microsoft by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, there's so many opportunities to actually make sure that, you know, that the software that you work with, you know, works alongside what you do, that's intuitive. And we came up, didn't we, with these kind of guiding principles specifically around the Juniper Education App, because we were able to, you know, really start with the need and the problems, and we came up with these 4 guiding principles, I guess, alongside our incredible UI and UX team. And did you want to talk a little bit about these kind of side of things, and how we made sure we always kept these in our hearts as we were developing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first set out to build the app and our other products as well, one of the things that I was really passionate about was it's easy to build a product, but it's a little bit harder to build a product that doesn't require any training. And I'm not saying that, you know, with some of our products you'll never have to do training. You might, but for us, if it's truly intuitive, you shouldn't really need to have that much support in terms of how to use it. So I think that for me was like the guiding one, was like, it needs to be so simple and easy to do that actually it's clear, you know what buttons to press, you know what, you know, if you're on step 1, step 2 becomes a very logical next step to that.
You're not
So
searching for the save button or,
yeah,
kind of the next button. Yeah.
totally. Yeah. So all of those things were really important. What was also really important for me was if you needed a certain functionality and the words are, oh yeah, we have a workaround for that, that's not good enough. You need a feature. We need to make sure that if it's a workaround, it's not a workaround. It is an actual feature. So again, that was really important, that we weren't cutting corners. And then leading on from that is that is then very logical, and can actually deliver the outcomes of that particular solution. And how we did that, and we'll talk about this more in the next slide, but we have a user experience, user interface team. So their role in all of this was to make these 4 guiding principles a reality. So it was their job to understand what that user experience needed to be end to end, looking at maybe outside of the education technology space to see how other industries are approaching user experience and how we can learn from that. And you'll see how in certain areas of the Juniper Education App, we've actually taken inspiration from platforms like Pinterest, platforms like Instagram and TikTok. You'll see that come through so that it really resonates. And again, you don't have training or needing to understand how they work. It feels so intuitive. Even now, when those bigger platforms, they release their newest user interface, we pick it up really quick, and I don't know why, but we do. Yeah. So that was something that we really wanted to get right in our product development.
Yeah, and it has really helped with the whole testing of everything. And I think when products are tested, obviously you get the technology, the QA side of things, and they test that it works, and then we test it internally, and then we test it externally, and I think the iterations that these things go through, even quite recently, we had to put in something for cookies, to accept cookies, and the button covered a different button. So and it's been really surprising for me just how much thoroughness, I guess, goes into this side of things. And I kind of just wish I'd known 10 years ago, when I was using different bits and pieces in the classroom, that there was an opportunity for me to kind of go, oh God, that's really frustrating. I wish it did it like X, Y, or Z, and I think that's what makes it better, is just that feedback loop, isn't it?
100%. And it's so important. Actually, if we move on to the next slide, this starts to explain how we actually did that. So we mentioned earlier that we interviewed schools and parents. Before that actually came market research. Now, I was quite lucky that I'd been working with communication tools for probably 5 years prior to that, and supporting schools with those communication tools as well. So I already had a good grasp of the market, but I'd never really delved too deep into what was out there. So that's where it really started, was looking at like what the market needed, but also what was outside of the education market that we could learn from as well. Then it went into the school and parent research and those interviews. What that then turned into was actually a working prototype. And that was for me, the most exciting and creative part of my role at that time, because I was actually able to take all of these learnings and put them into something that became really tangible. And it wasn't just a prototype for us to go, oh, right, yeah, let's go build that. We got that back out to those people that we spoke to, but out to the people that we interviewed. We did internal sessions where, it was a teacher specific session. If you've worked in a school, whether that be a teacher or an administrator or a school business manager, come and see these prototypes so that we can then test that, how that works. We did another parent facing session for the app in particular, so that we could test how that prototype worked, and to make sure that it was intuitive. And again, the measure of that was, if I had to explain it, it wasn't intuitive. So it was a really good way of feeding that back. And that doesn't stop at that prototype validation. That continues through when we go into development. We were able to make sure that we continued iterating even at that point, but the prototype gave us a real solid foundation.
Yeah, and I think one thing it's really important to say that we're not going to go into a lot of detail in this session about kind of actually the buying of the app or the selling of Juniper Education's app. But one other element that we were really keen to kind of make sure that we got right was when we said at the beginning about having that depth of information that you have. We've actually gone about this in a very modular way, and it is part of our join up approach. And so, there are elements of the Juniper Education app that you can or you can choose or not choose to take. So if you are particularly focused on, being able to do that, say you've got a Juniper website and you've got your news and your newsletters that you post to your website, but you actually want to get that right into the hands of the parents, you can choose that module. Or if you want to be able to share information about how, specific examples in the classroom that a pupil, we've got a more observation based tool, whether that's to, be positive and to talk about some incredible achievements, or it's, about how to support at home with a particular methodology of doing something, that's the other part of this. So as well as the design, the way in which all of the different components come together, it is very flexible, understanding that, you don't want to buy two things that do the same thing just because this does this extra feature that the other one doesn't do. So, that's also, I think, just another way in which we approach this. But yeah, all of this thinking has gone in. And I guess then when we think about, perhaps if we go on to the next slide and we can, we're going to have a conversation, but you should be able to see a demo of how the app comes together. And hopefully the things that we've been talking about, you'll start to see in real life. So, we launched the app back in September, didn't we?
We did, yeah. So we launched our first module, which was awards and activities. So that's all about recognising pupils' achievements in the classroom. Not all achievements are academic. Some are, and we have a module that sits alongside awards and activities with our Sonar tracker so that you can evidence and also show parents those academic achievements. But the awards and activities is more around those softer skills in the classroom. So that was our first one that we launched. If that's all that customers want, that's all this app can be. But as you'll see on screen, actually that's the awards and activities screen showing right now. But then it can build, and it's completely optional. So that's kind of our approach. That's probably our join up approach, actually. We're not even a development point of view. It's just how we work. So, you could connect your Juniper website up and feed through your news. What's on screen right now is our events module. So clubs, trips and parents evening can be booked, and where payments are required, you can pay. But all of these things you can add on. This is not about giving you another system that does different things. It could be about consolidation if that is appropriate and right for you. But if it's not, and actually just what you need is to be able to surface content back to parents to show what children have been doing, like what we're seeing on screen right now. This app really plays into that, and you can see there that's a video playing of a child in the classroom. We can engage with that content at parent level. We can surface that back to schools as well. So really what we're keen on with this app is it's not just another app to just give to parents. We want to give you engagement metrics. I don't think schools have been able to really have engagement data before around parental engagement. So that's one of the things that we want to deliver as part of the app is allowing parents to engage in a safe and controlled way. They can't free type to you or anything like that, but providing those engagement moments, surfacing them back at school level. So you would be able to have a metric along the lines of our parents are 95% engaged. Would love it to be 100% engaged, that sort of thing. And I think that's a really strong aspect to the app. And the reason that the app can deliver that engagement metric is because it's so visually based. We've really made sure that the app is engaging for parents, that it's an interesting place for them to go and hang out in, just like they will, spending time on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. I'm not saying this is the next Instagram and Facebook solution, but in terms of a school app, it's a lot brighter, it's a lot more visual than the other apps that are out there in the market. And let's face it, schools can be a really fun place to be at. You've got to entertain kids for hours in the day. Like, it can't be a boring place to be. It just can't. So we believe it's important to showcase that. And that's where we really wanted to put the emphasis on this. And what was quite not planned actually at all, but quite nice, was, you know, the app launched in September, the DfE white paper came out in February, and as we were all reading it, it became really obvious actually that the app plays into it really nicely, without us even, it was not planned, it's just what's the word, not circumstantial,
validating,
coincidence and validating. So yeah, that was a really nice moment, was to see this white paper but then look at our app, and we were just like, oh, that speaks to that. That's really nice.
So there's an interesting question that's come in from Lisa. She says, how should schools measure whether parental engagement is actually improving? And I think and that came in around the same time that the video was playing. So I think for us, this starts with the ability for parents to be able to respond in some way. Like if you send a newsletter out via email, you know, every fortnight or whatever you do, I mean, you could potentially put a read receipt on it to check that a parent had opened it up, but you don't know two things. You don't know if they've read it, and you also don't know which parts of it resonated that they read and they didn't read. And you're, you know, in a school, the pulling together of that newsletter is, you know, it takes the whole community. It probably takes you different year groups to update on what's been going on that week. There's probably something from the head teacher. There might be something from, you know, your estates manager about something that, you know, to look out for next time you're on the school grounds, etc., etc. So it's a whole piece, and you know, it's a lot of effort to curate these and send them out, you know, but are you doing it purposefully? So I think one of the things that would be really interesting, you know, to get feedback into is, I know that you're in our next round of development. Now we can start to see, you know, engagement coming in. So, you know, parents, you know, liking a post or, you know, whatever they're doing, you're going to be looking at doing something quite exciting with that, aren't you?
Yeah. So currently we already, you know, so for example, if I can find the place on the video, so for example, we already have for an observation as an example where we had that video. So here we can see here that's got an emoji against it, a heart. We've got predefined comments. There are interactions. They're those engagement points. So again, they can't freely type. It's controlled. We surface that back to say that that particular observation piece of content had this much engagement. What we now are going to do with that information over the next 3 months is surface that by aggregating all of that engagement so that parents themselves can have an engagement score. So you would be able to say, oh, that parent really highly engaged. That parent, they don't even have the app downloaded. This parent has the app downloaded, they're logged in, but they're not interacting with any content. So you'll be able to see what parents are actually doing within the app.
And on a strategic level, not just individualistically, right? So, you know, being able to see groups of, you know, and that way you can then you can target, you know, it might be, you know, maybe you need to run a session on, you know, how to download the app. Maybe, you know, maybe for this group that, you know, there's a better way to communicate, or, you know, but I think being able to identify, you know, spot a trend within your school community that will just, you know, I think, you know, it's those little steps, isn't it? If you can shift the needle 1%, 2% in terms of that increased engagement, that's where that's going to have. But what we would love back from our schools is, you know, we can pull together these metrics, and actually, you know, I'm really lucky. I've worked in before working at Juniper, I worked with some incredible assessment researchers, and, you know, we're kind of having conversations about, you know, the validity of an engagement score, you know, a validity of a thriving score, because obviously that came up in the white paper as well. And you can't just chuck a metric against it and then go, oh yes, you know, there has to be so much validation around it. So, you know, but so we're going to be working with academics from that point of view, but we absolutely need to hear from schools as to, you know, once we've started looking at these metrics, we'll get some data out, but we still need to know data itself isn't information. What we need to do through this product discovery process is to say, right, well, you know, we've you can kind of put yourself forward as a beta. If you're a school using the app and you've got parents engaging with it, and then we can surface information back to you saying it looks like these pockets of customers aren't engaging. Does that correlate with your feeling? Because I think that's what's surprising, having worked in schools, whether you're a small school or kind of 250, 350, I've worked in primary schools, not secondary schools. It's probably very different at secondary school. There's a lot more parents, and obviously teenagers, families all say that once it gets to secondary school, it's different. But thinking about this from a primary school perspective, you do, as a senior leader, you do know most of your families. You do know, those ones that are engaged. So, we need that real life, that lived experience to validate that the statistics and the engagement scores are right, because otherwise it's just data, and it's not informative, and it won't help improve that strategic side of things. So yeah, I mean, we'll hopefully have the opportunity to be able to share with you a way of being able to get in touch. But that's the bit that's important for us. It's that partnership. We're here talking about homeschool partnerships, but it's actually our partnership with you that will really make the difference here, to really make sure that you can be strategic with this. You can identify pockets of parents. Is using the Juniper Education app going to fix parent engagement? No, but understanding it, receiving that information back from parents to be able to, target, particular groups in particular ways. Yes, that's where you're really going to see that difference. And, that the Achieving and Thriving white paper, was such a fascinating read on that. And it, do need to be careful, because the minute you put a metric against something, everyone here who's knows, from assessing pupils, the minute you put a metric against it, it can have a negative impact as well. Because, if the engagement score, for example, only covers 4 areas, and you miss that other 5th area because it's not accounted for, you're gonna lose that ability. So you're having those conversations, understanding what an engaged parent looks like to a school is just as important in all of this.
Absolutely. And it's about like what you do with that data. So yeah, we can surface the data, but actually what are the processes in school that you would implement outside of technology? How would you take that information and think, right, okay, how do we now turn this around, or how do we improve on that? We talk about interventions with pupils quite frequently, but there's that point actually with wider things and with wider processes like that. So we'd be really interested about how this data feeds those interventions that you may put in place, and also how to then monitor that over time, I think, is also really important. It's not a one point in time metric. It needs to be ongoing. And then again, there's external factors. What might feed if engagement does drop? Why did it drop? With the technology can't give you that, but it can give you something has changed. And then it is that opportunity to then go and think about and explore why that may have changed.
Yeah. It's I think, the funding that you have at schools, the amount of, spare budget that you have, you really want to be able to show that, that where you're putting that spend has direct improvement back. And if you can show that, in your school improvement plan, that, you are looking to increase parental engagement by, 5% over the next academic year. And you can use something that goes, right, well, before we had this tool, we didn't know. Now, we've measured it halfway through the year and this many parents are engaged, and 4 weeks later, after some kind of an intervention, that's jumped by 5%. I mean, that really makes a difference. That really does allow you to be, systematic with the way you approach these things. It's not about, schools having to work harder. it's about making sure that that information is available back, that you can use it in a way that is going to increase that engagement to have improvement in the classroom. And that's the takeaway, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of our conversation about how we've approached it. I honestly didn't think we'd be able to talk for 45 minutes, but Helen, it turns out that we can. But more than happy, during this last little bit of the section, we've popped some questions on here. It is absolutely not expected that you have to answer them, but these are the sorts of things when we're engaging with schools, when we're doing our product discovery sessions, these are the types of things that we want to find out. It's not just a score this out of 10 and everything else. It really is getting into the detail. But yeah, I think from us, we just want to be able to support that conversation that you take back into your the staff room or wherever, kind of have a think about all of those ways. Perhaps it's an exercise for a staff meeting. What are all the different mechanisms we currently have to communicate with parents, from the verbal at the start and end of the day when they drop children off, to the phone calls, to the text messages, to the newsletters, to the PTA. Think about that big map and try and are there ways to be able to kind of can't pick all of it at once, but if you could focus the summer term on one particular area, where would you focus it? Would you focus it on your newsletter? Would you focus it on the way you share activities that have happened in the classroom? And I worked with an amazing teacher, my first teacher actually, and on the way out, before she let the children out to go meet the parents, each child had to say one thing that they'd done that day, because she knew that as soon as they got in front of the parents, they said, "What did you do at school today?" They'd all go, "Nothing." But hopefully something like this can stop that, because you don't with the whether it's the activities part of awards and activities or sonar observations, you'll literally be able to see, you designed a pyramid, I don't know, in DT today. And we want to be able to help with what questions that parents can then ask to actually get that engagement. But yeah, so have a think about all of those different areas, and how you can reduce any duplication. That's one of the key things in the with the newsletters. We know that schools are already producing newsletters that they're emailing out, or are available on the website. This is a way to be able to send that through the app, like directly into their hands. They've probably already got their phone close by them. It's a better experience, than opening it in an email. It can get lost in junk and all sorts of things. So, how can you make sure that you're reducing duplication, not creating additional workload? And yeah, where you want to prioritize it. But we'd love to hear, how you would approach that in your so I'm sure Helen and I would be happy to offer ourselves up to attend a staff meeting if you wanted to do that, and we could look across all of those communication ideas, with you, and kind of, that would be incredible for us. So, yeah, I guess that's probably us, unless there are any questions or anything that I've missed that have come in. But it's been an incredible opportunity, and hopefully our way of being able to connect with you at school, and show that there is a way to kind of really advocate for your school and your needs and your families through reaching out to edtech companies. We won't be the only ones doing it, so do take those opportunities to kind of make sure that what's being developed is absolutely done with you and your families in mind.
Absolutely.
Great. Jonathan, I don't know whether or not we just sign off and say thank you to everyone for attending.
I think he's lost camera access, so I think that might be a good place to to end on that one.
Okay, no problem at all. Really great to meet you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.